1 year and 6 months after the Council's ultimatum, humanity had fulfilled every requirement. Their military consisted of small defense fleets just enough to patrol their remaining territories. The outer colonies now flew Council flags and operated under galactic administration. Alien observers walked freely through human cities, monitoring and reporting, finding nothing suspicious. Human civilization continued. Markets bustled with commerce. Universities taught students from across human space. Artists created works that moved people to tears. Children played in parks and dreamed of the future. Everything appeared normal, peaceful, and thoroughly unremarkable. But something had changed. Something subtle that took the galactic community years to notice. Captain Hyunwoo, now working as a civilian transport pilot, noticed it first. His routes took him past the old military stations that orbited Earth and Mars. They weren't empty or abandoned as he expected. They had been converted. Research stations now occupied the spaces where weapons were once stored. Agricultural platforms grew food in rotating cylinders that once held missiles. Cultural centers hosted performances in halls that once briefed soldiers for war. The same transformation had occurred across human space. Every surrendered military base, every decommissioned warship, every former weapons facility had become something else. Something constructive, something focused not on the present, but on futures measured in centuries. In the orbital shipyards above Earth, Hyunwoo watched enormous vessels taking shape. They weren't warships. The Council inspectors had confirmed that repeatedly. They were colony ships, the largest ever built by any species. But they had features that puzzled analysts. Engines designed for journeys lasting decades, life support systems that could sustain populations for generations, storage bays large enough to carry entire ecosystems. "Where are they going?" his co-pilot asked, watching the construction through the viewport. "Beyond Council space," Hyunwoo said. "Far beyond. To places where stars haven't even formed yet." "Why?" "Because we can. Because we have time." The co-pilot looked at him strangely, but Hyunwoo just smiled and returned to his controls. In the Council chambers, 3 years after humanity's compliance, analysts presented disturbing reports. Human population growth had accelerated dramatically. Education rates had reached 100% across all human territories. Scientific publications from human institutions had tripled. Human merchant ships, though fewer in number than before, now traveled farther than ever, reaching systems that even elder species rarely visited. "They're expanding," a Carathian military advisor insisted, "just more slowly and quietly than before." "They're not expanding," Matriarch Kess of the Vrelian hegemony countered. She was the oldest being in the Council, having served for 300 years. "They're dispersing. Look at the patterns. They're not building an empire. They're spreading seeds." "Seeds of what?" "Of themselves. Their culture, their ideas, their way of thinking." She displayed star charts showing human ship movements. "They visit systems we've ignored. They make friends with species we've never bothered to contact. They trade with colonies so remote that we forgot they existed. And everywhere they go, they leave behind something valuable. Not military power, not economic dominance, just knowledge and goodwill." The speaker studied the data. "What are they doing?" "They're playing a longer game than we ever imagined. They're not trying to rule the galaxy today. They're trying to be remembered 10,000 years from now." The Council commissioned a psychological study of humanity. The results troubled everyone who read them. Humans showed no signs of resentment over their subjugation. If anything, they seemed grateful. Grateful for the forced reduction in military spending, which they redirected to education and research. Grateful for the loss of their outer colonies, which freed resources for deeper exploration. Grateful for the Council's attention, which validated their importance in galactic affairs. It was deeply unnatural. Species didn't respond to defeat this way. Species fought or submitted, resisted or collapsed. They didn't smile and say thank you. Dr. Mirai, now working at the Institute for Long-Term Studies, sometimes met with Ambassador Doyen for tea. He had retired from active diplomacy, but remained influential in human government. They sat in a small cafe overlooking the Han River in Seoul, watching boats drift past. "Do you ever think about the observers?" Mirai asked. "The ones who disappeared?" Doyen sipped his tea thoughtfully. "Every day." "Do you think they found their way home?" "I hope so. I hope they're living peaceful lives, trying to forget what they saw here." "But what did they see?" "Really? Doyen set down his cup and looked at her with ancient eyes. They saw a species that had given up trying to control everything. They saw people who had stopped fighting against the nature of reality and started working with it instead. They saw patience embodied in millions of humans all moving in the same direction without force or coercion. That scared them. It terrified them, because it suggested that everything their civilizations had built was built on the wrong foundation. Control is temporary. Force is expensive. Empire is exhausting. But patience, he smiled. Patience is free. Patience is infinite. And patience always wins in the end. The Council still doesn't understand. No. And they won't, not for a long time. That's okay. We're not in a hurry. Mireille thought about the colony ships being built in orbit.
Where will we go?
In those big ships? Everywhere, nowhere. Places that don't matter yet but will matter someday. We'll plant human communities in the dark spaces between spiral arms. We'll establish colonies around stars that won't fully ignite for 1,000,000 years. We'll scatter ourselves so widely that no disaster, no war, no council decision can ever threaten us as a whole. That will take thousands of years. Yes. Doyen picked up his tea again. Good thing we're patient. 50 years after the original ultimatum, Captain Hyun-woo stood on the observation deck of a colony ship, now a very old man. The ship was preparing to launch, one of hundreds departing human space that year. These vessels didn't travel to nearby stars. They traveled to voids between galactic arms, to nebulae that wouldn't birth stars for millions of years, to the darkest spaces where civilization could grow without interference. The galactic community watched these launches with confusion. Why go so far? What purpose did it serve? Some species theorized it was a retreat, humanity fleeing into exile. Others suggested it was a strategy, positioning for some future conflict. But those who understood, the few wise beings who had studied humanity carefully, knew the truth. Humanity wasn't retreating or positioning. They were simply spreading like seeds on the wind, trusting that some would find purchase in distant soil and grow into something magnificent. On Earth, in schools where human children learned alongside alien exchange students, teachers told new stories. Stories about patience and time. Stories about forests that took centuries to grow and civilizations that thought in millennia. Stories about rivers that carved canyons through mountains. Not through force, but through persistent flow. And the children listened and understood. They learned that their great-great-grandchildren's lives mattered more than their own temporary comfort. They learned that winning today meant nothing if you lost tomorrow. They learned that the universe was vast and ancient and indifferent, but also full of opportunities for those patient enough to wait for them. In the classified archives deep beneath Geneva, the full sensor data from the observer stations remained locked. Only a handful of people knew what it truly contained, and they would never speak of it publicly. The official story remained. The observers disappeared, cause unknown, no evidence of foul play. But those who had seen the data knew the truth. The observers had seen something in human eyes. Something patient, something that would outlast stars, something that knew with absolute certainty that time was on its side. And so they had run, not from violence or threats, but from the terrible knowledge that they were watching a species that had already won, simply by understanding what winning truly meant. The Council never demanded another explanation. Perhaps they feared what they might learn. Perhaps they preferred comfortable ignorance to uncomfortable truth. Humanity didn't mind. They had work to do, seeds to plant, futures to build, and all the time in the universe to do it. In a small apartment in Busan, a mother put her daughter to bed with an old story. Once upon a time, there were species who ruled the galaxy through force, and there were species who ruled through wealth, and there were species who ruled through knowledge. But there was one species that didn't try to rule at all. What did they do, Mama? They waited. And while they waited, they planted gardens. And those gardens grew into forests, and those forests grew into worlds, and those worlds grew into something the galaxy had never seen before. What was it? The future, sweetheart. They grew the future. The little girl thought about this as she drifted to sleep. Outside her window, stars shone in the night sky. Some of those stars had human colonies orbiting them now, some had ships traveling between them, and some, the faintest ones, had seeds planted in their darkness waiting for the right moment to bloom. Month 11 arrived with a catastrophe that shook the entire galactic community. Every remaining observer station, All 15 of them experienced the same phenomenon simultaneously. Within a span of 3 minutes, 43 aliens across 15 stations vanished without trace. This time something else happened too. Exactly 1 hour after the disappearances, the stations themselves powered down. Life support remained active, but all other systems went dark. Communications ceased. Sensors stopped recording. The stations became silent metal shells orbiting Earth. Council rescue teams, now experienced with this strange phenomenon, approached carefully. They boarded the stations with weapons ready, expecting anything. What they found was worse than an attack or a threat. In each command center, on the main display screen, someone had left an image. It showed Earth from space, that familiar blue and white sphere, beautiful and serene against the darkness. Below the image was text in perfect galactic standard script. "We tried to tell you." That was all. No explanation, no signature, no additional context. Just those 4 words and the image of Earth. The galactic news networks exploded with speculation. Emergency sessions convened in every major government. Military fleets moved to full alert status. Some species called for immediate action against humanity. Others counseled patience, pointing out that no violence had actually occurred. But everyone agreed on one thing: they were terrified. The council scheduled an emergency session within 48 hours. Every species sent their highest authorities. Military commanders stood ready to present threat assessments. Scientists prepared reports on possible technologies that could explain the disappearances. Philosophers debated what the message meant, and humanity sent Ambassador Doyon, flying to the council chambers aboard a simple diplomatic shuttle with minimal escort. When Doyon entered the council chambers, he could feel the fear in the air. Species that had ruled the galaxy for millennia looked at him with expressions he had never seen before. Not anger, not hatred, fear. The speaker's voice trembled slightly as it addressed him. "Ambassador Doyon, 43 beings have vanished from stations under your protection. Before they disappeared, someone left a message suggesting humanity bears responsibility. What do you have to say?" Doyon stood in the center of the chamber floor just as he had almost a year ago. But this time, every being in the room leaned forward, desperate to hear his words. "We accept the council's judgment," he said simply. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "We will comply with all demands as originally stated. The dismantling of our military assets will begin immediately after the deadline. Our outer colonies will be surrendered to council administration as planned. Observers will continue to be welcomed on Earth and our remaining territories." Silence filled the chamber. This was not the response anyone expected. "We need only one thing in return," Doyon continued. "Time. Give humanity 12 months to make these arrangements properly. We wish to avoid chaos and ensure peaceful transitions. We want to do this correctly with dignity for all parties involved." "You're surrendering?" A young Carathian delegate couldn't contain his shock. "After everything, after the disappearances, after the fear you've caused, you're just giving up?" "We are not giving up. We are complying." "There is a difference." Doyon's expression remained neutral. "You asked us to become smaller, less threatening, more manageable. We are doing exactly that." The ancient speaker raised its arms for silence. When it spoke, its voice carried millennia of wisdom and experience. "Ambassador Doyon, what happened to our people?" For the first time, emotion crossed Doyon's face, sadness, genuine regret. "I don't know. Truly, I don't. Our investigations have found no evidence of foul play, no weapon signatures, no explanation. We are as confused as you are. We will share everything we discover." The terrible thing was they believed him. Every species in that chamber, with all their advanced technology and understanding of psychology and deception, believed that the human ambassador truly did not know what had happened. And somehow, that made it worse. The council accepted humanity's offer. 12 months to complete the dismantling of their military and the transfer of their colonies. Observers would be allowed to remain, though many species quietly withdrew their personnel, unwilling to risk more disappearances. Back on Earth, in the underground facility, Dr. Mireille worked late into the night. She had permission now to analyze the full data from all the observer stations. Director Sunwoo had finally unlocked the classified files, though he remained tight-lipped about why. She found the same pattern at every station. Just before the disappearances, that microsecond burst of mathematical communication, the same question asked 15 times. "Do you understand what you're asking us to become?" But this time she found something else. Responses. The alien crews had tried to answer. Their responses varied, but they all expressed the same basic sentiment: confusion, fear, and a desperate need to leave. One response, from a Vrelian scientist, was particularly clear. "We understand now. We can't stay here. We can't watch this. Forgive us." Mireille read that message a dozen times, trying to understand. Watch what? What had they seen or realized that made trained observers abandon their posts? She took her findings to Director Sunwoo. He read through everything carefully, then looked at her with an expression she couldn't read. "Do you want to know the truth, Dr. Mireille?" "Yes, nothing happened. No weapon, no attack, no abduction. Our people did nothing to those observers. They simply left. Their escape pods are probably halfway to their home systems by now, assuming they haven't already arrived." "But why?" "Because they finally understood what we were trying to tell the Council from the beginning." Sunwoo pulled up old records, humanity's first speech to the Council 200 years ago. "Do you remember this?" Mireille read the text on the screen. Words spoken by humanity's first ambassador. "We are a young species. We have known war. We have known hate. We have nearly destroyed ourselves. But we learned. We grew. We became patient. And now we understand. The universe is vast and we have time." "The Council thought we were talking about joining their community," Sunwoo said quietly. "They thought we meant we had time to adapt to their rules, to become part of their galactic order. But we meant something else. We meant that we had already won. Not by conquest or force, but by understanding something fundamental that they missed." He gestured to the data on the screens around them. "The observers were stationed here for months. They watched us. They studied us. And slowly they started to see it too." "See what?" Sunwoo stood and walked to the window that showed a simulated view of Earth's surface. Cities sprawled below, full of life and activity. They saw a species that wasn't fighting. A species that wasn't resisting. A species that accepted subjugation without protest. And they realized what that meant. Mireille thought about the observer's final message: "Forgive us." They realized we were playing a different game. Not even a game. Games have winners and losers. We're not trying to win. We're just trying to outlast. Outlast what? Everything. The Council, their rules, their empires, their civilizations, all of it. Because we understand something they've forgotten. Something that younger species rarely grasp. He turned to face her. "On cosmic timescales, nothing lasts. Empires fall. Civilizations collapse. Species go extinct. But patience? Patience endures. And a species that masters patience doesn't need to conquer. They just need to wait." Mireille felt a chill run down her spine. The observers saw that. They understood that we weren't surrendering. We were just stepping aside, letting the Council think they won while we prepared for something longer. And it terrified them. Because if we're right, if patience really is the ultimate strategy, then everything their civilizations have built, everything they've fought for, all their power and influence and control, it's all temporary, meaningless, just noise in the vast silence of time, and we're the silence. We're learning to be. Outside the facility, Earth continued its rotation. Day turned to night, night to day. Seasons changed. Years passed. And humanity, having finally learned the hardest lesson, simply waited. In the Council chambers, debates raged about what to do with the human problem. But increasingly those debates felt hollow. What could you do with a species that agreed to everything, complained about nothing, and somehow made you feel like you'd lost anyway? Some species began withdrawing from human space entirely, unwilling to face whatever truth the observers had discovered. Others tried to pretend everything was normal, that humanity was just another subject species. But in the darkness of their private chambers, the elder species knew something had changed. The balance of power hadn't shifted through war or economics or diplomacy. It had shifted through something far more profound: understanding. 3 months had passed since the Council's ultimatum, and Captain Hyunwoo found himself back in Earth's solar system for the first time in 5 years. His ship docked at one of the massive orbital stations that circled the planet like a ring of metal and glass. As he walked through the station's corridors, he noticed how crowded everything had become. Thousands of personnel were returning from the frontier, and the inner systems were struggling to accommodate them all. He reported to his new assignment at Earth Defense Command, a position that sounded important, but involved mostly watching sensors and filing reports. It felt like a waste of his training, but orders were orders. Captain Hyunwoo, a young lieutenant, approached him in the command center. Admiral Taeyang wants to see you in her office. The admiral's office overlooked the curve of Earth below. Hyunwoo had never met her before, but her reputation was legendary. She had commanded fleets during the brief conflict with the Sardelian raiders 20 years ago, and she was known for being direct and honest with her people. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. You commanded the patrol ship Horizon at New Seoul, correct? Yes, ma'am. Good ship, good crew. I'm sorry we had to pull you back. She gestured for him to sit. I know this must be confusing. A lot of good officers are wondering why we're abandoning positions we spent decades building. I follow orders, ma'am. I don't need to understand them. No, but you deserve to. She leaned back in her chair. We're not abandoning anything, Captain. We're repositioning. The Council wants us small and manageable. So we'll be small and manageable, but small doesn't mean weak, and manageable doesn't mean controlled. Hyunwoo waited for her to continue, but she simply smiled and changed the subject. You'll be monitoring long-range sensors for the next few months. Pay attention to ship movements, especially Council vessels. Note anything unusual. Can you do that? Of course, ma'am. Good. Dismissed. As Hyunwoo left the office, he felt more confused than before. The Admiral's words suggested some kind of plan, but he couldn't see what it might be. All he saw was humanity pulling back, giving up territory, accepting restrictions. How was that not defeat? Meanwhile, the Council's observer fleet arrived at the edge of Earth's solar system. 17 ships from different species, each carrying diplomatic observers and monitoring equipment. They expected resistance or at least bureaucratic delays. Instead, they were greeted by Commander Jisoo aboard a small escort vessel. Welcome to human space, she said over the communication channel. Her voice was professional and warm. We've prepared orbital positions for each of your vessels. You'll have full sensor access to Earth and our inner colonies as stipulated in the agreement. Please follow our navigation beacons. The observer fleet followed the human ship deeper into the solar system. They passed Mars, where human colonies dotted the red surface. They passed the massive shipyards where humanity built its vessels. Everything looked normal, peaceful, orderly. The Vrelian observer ship, commanded by Kelthera, settled into a high orbit above Earth's northern hemisphere. She activated her ship's advanced sensors and began scanning the planet below. Cities sprawled across the continents. Ships moved between orbital stations and the surface. Communications traffic flowed in steady streams. Everything appeared completely ordinary. This is strange, her second officer said. Where are the military preparations? Where are the protests? Our intelligence suggested humans would resist the Council's demands. Kelthera thought about the message Dr. Mirai had sent her months ago, that sad, resigned tone. Perhaps they're not resisting because they have something else in mind. Like what? I don't know. That's what worries me. Days turned into weeks. The observer ships maintained their positions, their sensors recording everything. Human cities continued their daily rhythms. Factories produced goods. Farms grew food. Children went to school. Everything was normal. But the communications the observers intercepted were strangely sparse. Humans talked about weather and sports and entertainment, but rarely about politics or the military. It was as if an entire species had agreed not to discuss certain topics where others might listen. In the galactic news networks, speculation reached fever pitch. Some analysts predicted humanity would launch a surprise attack. Others suggested they were developing a secret weapon. A few proposed that humans were simply accepting their place in the galactic order, finally becoming civilized. The elder species, the ones who had seen countless civilizations rise and fall, said nothing. But they watched, and they remembered other species who had gone quiet before doing something unexpected. On Earth, Dr. Mirai walked through the halls of a facility she wasn't supposed to talk about. The complex was built deep underground, far from any sensors the observers might use. Thousands of scientists and analysts worked here, studying everything the observers did, every question they asked, every pattern in their surveillance. They're getting nervous, her supervisor, Director Sunwoo, said during their morning briefing. The Vrelians especially. They keep scanning for military buildups that aren't there. Because we're not building up, Mirai said. We're doing exactly what the Council asked. Exactly. And that's what makes them nervous. Sunwoo pulled up a holographic display showing ship movements across human space. Look at this. Every human vessel is exactly where it's supposed to be. Every colony is reducing its military presence right on schedule. We're the most compliant species in Council history. So why do they seem afraid? Because compliance can be more frightening than resistance. Resistance, they understand. Compliance from humans. He shook his head. We have a reputation for being stubborn and argumentative. Suddenly we're cooperative and quiet. That breaks their pattern expectations, and beings don't like broken patterns. Mirai studied the displays. She had spent 15 years learning to understand alien psychology. But now she was using that knowledge in ways she never expected. What are we really doing, Director? What's the actual plan? Sunwoo looked at her for a long moment. We're being patient, Dr. Mirai, that's all. Just patient. It wasn't a real answer, but Mirai knew she wouldn't get a better one. In the council chambers, debates raged about the human situation. The younger species wanted action. They're planning something, a Carathian delegate insisted. We should demand full access to their facilities, not just sensor data. The speaker raised its arms for silence. Humanity has complied with every requirement we've set. They are reducing their military. They are preparing to transfer the outer colonies. They have accepted our observers. What more can we demand? Transparency, the Carathian said. We don't know what they're thinking. We never know what any species is thinking, the speaker replied. We can only judge them by their actions, and their actions are exactly what we asked for. But even the speaker felt uneasy. In 10,000 years of galactic politics, it had learned to trust its instincts. And its instincts said something was wrong about the situation. In orbit above Earth, Commander Jisoo managed the human vessels that supported the observer fleet. It was tedious work, making sure the alien ships had everything they needed, answering their questions, providing navigational data. But she did it with perfect professionalism. One day, a young officer approached her. Commander, the Vrelian ship is requesting information about our military shipyards, specifically what we're building there. Tell them they're welcome to scan the yards with their sensors. We have nothing to hide. But ma'am, they'll see the new construction projects. Yes, they will. And they'll see that we're building exactly what we said we're building. Research vessels, colony ships, trading vessels, no warships, no weapons platforms, just civilian infrastructure. Jisoo smiled slightly. Sometimes the truth is the best deception. The young officer looked confused but relayed the message. Hours later, the Vrelian ship conducted detailed scans of the human shipyards. Their report to the council confirmed that humanity was building civilian vessels, not military ones. But Kelthera noticed something in the data that troubled her. The colony ships humanity was building were enormous, far larger than necessary for traveling to nearby systems. They had engines designed for journeys of decades, maybe centuries, life support systems that could sustain populations for generations. She filed a report about this, but the council analysts dismissed it. Humans have always been ambitious colonizers, they said. They're probably planning to reach distant systems. It's not a threat, Kelthera wasn't so sure, but she kept watching and recording data, hoping to understand what the humans were really doing. Back on Earth, in a school in Seoul, children learned their lessons like children always had. They studied mathematics and literature and history, but they also learned something new, woven into every subject: patience. Teachers spoke of great achievements that took generations to accomplish. They told stories of seeds planted by grandparents that became forest for grandchildren, and the children listened, absorbing lessons their parents and grandparents had learned the hard way. Time was not the enemy. Time was the tool, and humanity had finally learned how to use it. 8 months after the Council's ultimatum, something happened that nobody expected. A Confederation patrol ship encountered a human mining operation in a disputed asteroid belt, on the outer edge of claimed space. The area had been contested for years, with both humans and the Sardelian Confederation claiming mining rights. The patrol commander, expecting an argument or at least negotiation, was shocked when the human miners simply acknowledged the patrol and began packing up their equipment. Within hours, they had loaded everything onto their transport ships and departed, leaving behind millions of credits worth of partially processed ore and some heavy equipment that would take too long to move. They just left, the patrol commander reported back to his superiors. No argument, no demands for compensation. They simply said understood and withdrew. This report reached the council within days. Analysts studied it from every angle. Some saw it as proof that humanity was becoming properly civilized, learning to avoid conflict. Others found it disturbing. Species didn't abandon valuable resources without reason. More reports followed. Human research stations in neutral zones shut down and returned home. Human trading posts on the borders closed their doors. Human survey ships stopped exploring unclaimed systems. Everywhere, humanity was pulling back, consolidating, becoming smaller. In the underground facility on Earth, senior analyst Hanul reviewed these reports with growing fascination. She had spent 30 years studying galactic politics and human psychology, and something about this pattern felt significant. "Look at this," she told Director Sunwoo, displaying a map of human space. "Every withdrawal is calculated. Every departure is orderly. Nothing is left behind that could be used against us. No angry colonists who refuse to leave. No equipment that might reveal our technology. Just clean, complete disengagement." "That's the plan," Sunwoo said. "Yes, but it's the opposite of every pattern in human history. We fought wars over islands. We died for symbolic victories. We held positions long after they became indefensible, just because surrender felt wrong." She zoomed in on the map. This level of coordination and discipline across millions of people, all following orders they don't understand without protest or resistance, it's unprecedented. Maybe we've grown up as a species. Maybe. Or maybe we've learned something that makes all that old stubbornness irrelevant. Hanul looked at her supervisor. "What did we learn, Director?" "What do we know that they don't?" Sunwoo was quiet for a long moment. "We learned that winning the battle doesn't matter if you lose the war. And we learned that winning the war doesn't matter if you lose the peace. And we learned that winning the peace doesn't matter if you lose the future. And the future belongs to whoever can wait the longest." Before Hanul could ask what that meant, alarms began sounding throughout the facility. Emergency protocols activated. Secure communications lit up with urgent messages. Observer Station 7, positioned above North America, had gone offline. The response was immediate. Human rescue ships launched within minutes. Council vessels from other observer stations moved to investigate. But when they arrived at Station 7's last known position, they found the station intact and functional. Its life support was running. Its computers were operational. Its logs showed normal activities up until exactly 17 minutes ago. The crew of 5 aliens was simply gone. Search teams combed every centimeter of the station. They found personal belongings, half-eaten meals, a data pad left open to a routine weather report. Everything suggested the crew had vanished in the middle of their normal activities without warning or struggle. "There's no sign of weapons fire," the rescue team leader reported. "No energy signatures consistent with teleportation. No chemical traces suggesting sedation or poison. No forced entry. The crew just stopped being here." The council demanded answers. Ambassador Doyen, attending the emergency session via hologram from Earth, looked genuinely troubled. "This is deeply concerning. We're cooperating fully with the investigation. Our search teams are working alongside yours. We want to understand what happened as much as you do." "This happened in your space," a Carathian delegate snarled. "Under your watch. What did you do to them?" "We did nothing. Station 7 was operating independently, as agreed. We had no personnel aboard and no ships in the immediate area at the time of the disappearance." "Then how do you explain this?" "I can't. That's why we're investigating." The council accepted this response, but suspicion grew. 3 weeks later, Observer Station 11, monitoring the Pacific Ocean region, experienced the exact same phenomenon. The crew of 4 aliens vanished without trace. The station remained functional. The logs showed nothing unusual. This time, panic spread through the galactic community. News networks broadcast constant updates. Military fleets began repositioning, not quite mobilizing for war, but definitely preparing for something. "The humans are picking them off one by one," some analysts claimed. "They have some kind of weapon we can't detect. But why?" Others argued. If humans wanted to attack the observers, why not destroy the stations? Why leave them intact? Why this mysterious disappearance? Nobody had good answers. In Earth orbit, Captain Hyunwoo watched the alien fleet movements on his long-range sensors. Ships from a dozen species were repositioning around human space, forming a loose cordon. Not quite a blockade, but close. "They're scared," his sensor operator said. "Look at those formations. They're defensive postures, not offensive ones." "Scared of what?" Hyunwoo wondered aloud. "We haven't done anything." Maybe that's what scares them. Hyunwoo thought about Admiral Taiyang's words from months ago. Small doesn't mean weak. Manageable doesn't mean controlled. At the time, he hadn't understood. Now, watching alien fleets position themselves defensively around human space while human ships continued their peaceful routines, he began to glimpse something. The Council had demanded humanity become smaller, weaker, less threatening, and humanity had agreed. But in that agreement, in that compliance, there was something that frightened species who had ruled the galaxy for millennia. He just couldn't figure out what it was. Dr. Mirai received new orders reassigning her to a different section of the underground facility. She now worked in a special team analyzing the sensor data from the disappeared observer stations. What she found confused her even more. "There's nothing here," she told her team lead. "No weapon signatures. No unusual energy readings. The only anomaly is that the crews stopped transmitting. Keep looking. There must be something." Mirai dove deeper into the data. She examined every sensor reading from the hours before the disappearances. She cross-referenced communication logs, environmental data, even the station's automated maintenance records. And then she found it. A microsecond burst of data from Station 7, transmitted just before the crew vanished. It wasn't a weapon signature or an alarm. It was a message encoded in pure mathematics, the universal language that all spacefaring species understood. The message was a question. "Do you understand what you're asking us to become?" Mirai stared at the screen. The message wasn't from any human source. The origin point was somewhere inside Station 7 itself, and it was addressed to no one specifically, broadcast in all directions like a shout into the void. She took this discovery to Director Sunwoo immediately. He studied the data for a long time, his face unreadable. Then he locked the files behind the highest classification protocols. "This doesn't leave this room," he said firmly. "Not yet. But Director, shouldn't the Council know? This might explain. The Council will know what we tell them when we're ready to tell them. Right now they're afraid because they don't understand. Good. Let them stay afraid a little longer." "But our people didn't send this message. It came from inside the station." "I know." Sunwoo looked at her carefully. "Which means the observers found something. Or realized something. And whatever it was, it made them leave." "Leave? You think they abandoned their posts voluntarily?" "I think they ran away. I think they saw something or understood something that made staying impossible. And I think we should be very careful about revealing what that might have been." Mirai felt cold, because if the Council knew their own people fled in fear, not because of anything we did, but because of something they realized, then questions would be asked. Questions we're not ready to answer yet. Across human space, people continued their lives. They worked and played and raised children. They built things and created art and fell in love. To any observer, human civilization looked peaceful, productive, and completely non-threatening. But in thousands of underground facilities, in classified meetings and encrypted communications, humanity was watching and waiting. They tracked every ship movement, analyzed every alien communication, studied every pattern in galactic politics. They were learning, always learning, building understanding piece by piece like a puzzle assembling itself in slow motion. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, abandoned observer stations drifted in silence, their empty corridors holding secrets that nobody wanted to speak aloud. The Council chamber floated in the darkness of space, orbiting a dead moon that belonged to no one. Inside the massive dome of crystal and metal, representatives from 47 different species sat in their designated sections. Some breathed oxygen, others methane. Some saw in colors humans couldn't imagine, while others perceived the world through vibrations and heat. But today they all focused on the same thing, the humans. Ambassador Doyen stood alone at the center of the chamber floor. He was a small figure compared to the towering Relians or the massive bulk of the Carathian delegates. His simple gray suit looked plain next to the elaborate robes and armor of the other species, but his face remained calm as he listened to the charges against his people. The speaker, an ancient being whose species had traveled the stars for 10,000 years, raised 3 of its 6 arms. The translation devices built into every seat hummed to life. Humanity has been part of this council for 200 standard years. In that time you have expanded faster than any species in recorded history. You have built 17 colony worlds. Your military fleets number in the thousands. Your weapons development concerns us greatly. Doyen said nothing. He simply stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his expression neutral. We have tolerated this growth because you claimed it was for defense. You said humans needed protection from the dangers of space. But our intelligence reports suggest otherwise. Your ships patrol far beyond your borders. Your colonies are armed like fortresses. Your people trained for war from childhood. Around the chamber, representatives from dozens of species nodded their various heads, antennae, and sensory organs. The Vrelians, tall and thin with skin like blue glass, whispered among themselves. The Carathians, who looked like bears made of living stone, growled their agreement. Therefore, the speaker continued, the Council has reached a decision. Humanity will reduce its military forces by 70%. You will surrender control of your 12 outer colonies to Council administration. You will accept permanent observers on Earth, who will monitor your activities and ensure compliance. You have 1 standard year to meet these requirements. The chamber fell silent. Every being present waited for the human response. They expected anger. They expected threats. Some had even prepared for humanity to withdraw from the Council entirely, which would likely mean war. Instead, Ambassador Doyen simply bowed his head slightly. Thank you for your decision. We will deliberate on these terms and provide our formal response within the allotted time frame. His voice was quiet, respectful, and completely unreadable. The speaker's translator buzzed with confusion. You have no immediate response? No questions? No request for negotiation? We will need time to discuss this with our government, Doyen said. That is all. And then he left. The human delegation filed out of the chamber in perfect silence, their faces showing nothing. In the observation galleries, younger species who had never dealt with humans before found this fascinating. The older species, the ones who had watched civilizations rise and fall for millennia, felt something they rarely experienced: unease. 3 days later, Captain Hyunwoo received new orders at his station on the mining colony of New Seoul. The message was brief and encrypted at the highest level. All deep space personnel are to return to inner system positions within 60 days. Maintain normal operations until transfer. No explanation to be given to non-human contacts. Hyunwoo read the message 3 times. He commanded a small patrol ship that monitored the outer edge of human territory, a region where pirates sometimes tried to raid mining operations. His crew was small, only 15 people, but they were good at their job. And now they were being called home. He looked at the star charts on his screen. New Seoul orbited a red dwarf star, barely hospitable, chosen because the asteroid belt nearby was rich in rare metals. It had taken humanity decades to build this colony, and now they were just leaving? Commander? His second officer, a young woman named Jisoo, appeared at his shoulder. Did you see the recall order? I did. Do you know what it's about? No. Hyunwoo closed the message file. But we follow orders. Start plotting a course back to Earth. We leave in 48 hours. Across human space, the same scene repeated thousands of times. Ships received orders. Personnel packed their belongings. Stations began shutdown procedures, and nobody explained why. The galactic trade networks noticed first. Human merchant ships started refusing long-term contracts. Human traders began selling their warehouses on alien worlds, converting everything to raw materials and energy credits. Human students at the great universities of the Vrelian hegemony withdrew from their programs and booked passage home. On the news networks that spanned the galaxy, analysts tried to understand what was happening. The humans appear to be consolidating, one Vrelian commentator said, his translator making his concern obvious. But why? The Council's demands are serious but not unreasonable. Many species have accepted similar restrictions in the past. Perhaps they plan to refuse, another analyst suggested. They might be preparing for conflict. But there were no signs of military buildup. Human warships returned to their home systems and docked at orbital stations. Human colonies reduced their defensive postures rather than increasing them. Everything suggested compliance, not resistance. Dr. Mireille worked aboard the Earth Embassy ship, a massive vessel that served as humanity's diplomatic center. She was a xenolinguist, someone who studied alien languages and cultures. For 15 years, she had worked closely with representatives from dozens of species, building friendships and understanding. Now she sat in her quarters, packing her personal belongings into storage containers. On her desk sat a small crystal sculpture, a gift from her Vrelian colleague Kelthera. They had spent 5 years working together on a translation project, trying to convert ancient human literature into forms that alien minds could appreciate. She picked up the crystal and turned it over in her hands. Then she activated her communication terminal and recorded a message. Kelthera, I wanted to let you know that I'm being recalled to Earth. I don't know when we'll be able to finish our work on the Shakespeare translations. I'm sorry we couldn't have more time. Perhaps someday we'll meet again. She sent the message and continued packing. Outside her window, Earth hung in the darkness like a blue jewel. Home. She hadn't realized how much she missed it until now. When Kelthera received the message hours later, she watched it 3 times. Something about the human's tone disturbed her. It wasn't angry or frightened. It was sad, resigned, like someone saying goodbye before a long journey they might not return from. The Vrelian saved the message and forwarded it to the Council's Intelligence Division. She added a note. This doesn't feel like preparation for war. It feels like preparation for something else. I don't know what. Across the galaxy, similar reports began to accumulate. Human behavior was changing, but not in ways that made sense. They were complying with the Council's demands before those demands were even formally delivered. They were withdrawing from galactic society voluntarily, quietly, without protest or explanation, and somehow, that was more frightening than any threat could have been. In his office on Earth, Ambassador Doyen sat alone, looking at reports from across human space. The withdrawal was proceeding exactly as planned. In 60 days, 90% of human personnel would be back in the inner systems. The outer colonies would be prepared for transfer. Everything was moving like clockwork. He opened a drawer in his desk and pulled out an old photograph. It showed Earth from space, taken by one of the first satellites humanity had ever launched. Before faster-than-light travel, before contact with alien species, before humanity knew they weren't alone. The planet looked the same now as it did then. Blue and white and green, beautiful, patient, waiting. Doyen smiled slightly and put the photograph away. Then he returned to his work, making lists and sending orders, helping his species prepare for what came next, whatever that might be.